The metal latch snapped like a dry twig and the heavy cage door swung out with a sudden groan. People in the small shelter yard froze as the big German shepherd surged forward, muscles tight, eyes wide, breathing loud, as if the whole world had been pressing on him from the inside. Workers had warned everyone that this dog, Bruno, was not ready for crowds, not ready for noise, not ready for hands reaching in fast. He had been rescued from a place where shouting was normal and kindness came late, and even now he carried that old fear like a chain around his chest. That afternoon the chain broke, and the yard became a shallow bowl of panic, with the dog at the center and the exit gate far too small in everyone's mind. A broom clattered to the ground. A man stepped back and bumped a bucket, and the sound made Bruno flinch hard. His ears flattened, his tail stiffened, and his paws scraped the concrete as he turned in sharp, quick angles, searching for the next threat that might jump out at him. A volunteer named Ollie lifted his hands slowly the way trainers did, trying to make his body look calm, but his breath was not calm, and the dog heard that truth. The other volunteers began to pull visitors behind a fence, whispering for children to move first. Parents tugged sleeves and shoulders, trying to guide little feet away from the danger they imagined, and the yard filled with the soft rush of people retreating. In the middle of that motion, one small figure did not follow the flow. A little girl named Mina stood near a painted wall where paw prints were drawn in bright colors, and she did not run. She was not fearless in the loud, movie kind of way, and her hands were not clenched into fists of bravery. She looked more like a child who had seen fear before and understood what it could do to a living thing. Her father, Karim, had come to the shelter to ask about adopting a calm, older dog, and he had promised Mina they would only look, only learn, only say hello from a safe distance. Now Karim's promise felt like it was tearing at the seams, because Mina was still standing there while the big dog paced closer. Karim reached for her arm, but people pressed in between them for a second, and Mina slipped from his fingertips like a leaf in wind. Ollie saw it and tried to step forward, but Bruno whipped his head toward the motion and gave a low warning sound that held the yard still. Everyone understood that sound even if they did not know dogs well, because it carried the same message as a slammed door. Stop. Stay back. Bruno's eyes locked onto Mina, not because she was the smallest, but because she was the quietest. The dog had been reading bodies all his life, reading shoulders and chins and feet, reading danger in the smallest shift. Mina's shoulders were lowered. Her chin was slightly down. Her hands were open and empty. She did not lean forward, and she did not stare hard into the dog's eyes the way some people did when they wanted to look strong. She simply stayed in place, breathing slowly, as if she was trying to show her breath to the air. Karim finally pushed through and called her name, but Mina did not turn. She heard him, but she also heard the dog, heard the heavy inhale and the uneven exhale that sounded like a storm trapped in a chest. Mina remembered a smaller storm from her own life, when thunder once shook their apartment windows and she had hidden under a table, waiting for the sky to calm down. Her mother had crawled under there with her and spoken softly until Mina's hands stopped shaking. Mina could not explain it in grown words, but she felt that Bruno was hiding under his own table, even while standing tall. The yard seemed too bright, too open, too full of eyes. Bruno took a step toward Mina, then another. His nails clicked. His head was low, and his body was ready to spring, but not in the way people imagined, not like a hunter, but like an animal deciding whether to run or fight because both felt like the only choices. Ollie whispered for Mina to move back slowly, but Mina did not trust her feet to slide without turning into a sudden run. She knew sudden runs could wake the wrong part of a frightened animal. So she stayed, and she made one careful choice. She lowered herself to sit on the ground, slow enough that the movement looked like a leaf settling. A few gasps rose behind the fence, but Mina did not hear them clearly. She was listening for the dog's breath, and she was watching the space between them like it was a thin bridge. Bruno paused. His ears shifted forward, then back. He blinked once, then blinked again. A trainer named Nadia stepped into view at the far side of the yard, holding a leash and a soft slip lead, but she did not rush. Nadia had worked with frightened dogs for years, and she knew the worst mistake was to turn every second into a chase. She moved like she was walking through water, slow and steady, eyes not fixed on Bruno, shoulders loose. Kareem whispered to her that Mina was still out there, and Nadia nodded without changing her pace. She saw Mina sitting, saw the open hands, saw the calm face, and for a moment Nadia looked surprised, not because Mina was brave, but because Mina was wise in a way that could not be taught quickly. Bruno took another step, closer now, and Mina's heart jumped, but she kept her hands resting on her knees. She looked at the dog's chest, not his eyes, the way Nadia had once shown visitors during an adoption class earlier that day. Mina had been half listening at the time, but the advice had stayed in her head like a small light. Do not stare. Do not reach fast. Be calm like a tree. Bruno lowered his nose toward the ground and sniffed the air. He could smell the shelter, the cleaning soap, the food, the old wood, and under it all he could smell Mina, a gentle smell of outdoor wind and simple lunch, not sharp, not loud. He sniffed again, then lifted his head and stopped just a few steps away. The yard held its breath with him. Mina's fingers twitched, not to grab, but to steady herself. She whispered a few words, soft and plain, words she used with her cousin's shy cat at home. Hello. It is okay. You are safe. Her voice was small, but it was steady, and Bruno heard the steadiness more than the words. His posture shifted, just a little, as if the tight rope in his body loosened by a single strand. Nadia was closer now, still not rushing, letting Mina and Bruno set the rhythm. Ollie stood ready near the gate in case Bruno bolted, but his hands were no longer waving, and his breath became slower as he copied Nadia's calm. Kareem's eyes stayed on his daughter, and fear mixed with pride in a painful way that made his throat tight. He wanted to pull Mina away, but he also saw something happening that he could not force and could not fake. Bruno took one more step. Mina remained still. The dog's nose reached forward, sniffing the air near her hair, near her shoulder, and Mina resisted the urge to turn her head. She let him choose. Bruno sniffed again, and the warning sound did not return. Instead, his mouth opened slightly as he breathed out, and the sound was different now, less like a storm and more like a tired sigh. Nadia lifted the slip lead slowly, preparing to loop it in one smooth motion if Bruno stayed calm. The moment felt fragile, like a glass ornament hanging from a thin string. Then a door inside the shelter building slammed as someone rushed through it without thinking. The sudden bang cracked the quiet like lightning, and Bruno's whole body jolted. His eyes flashed wide again, his paws scrambled, and he spun half around as if he might sprint. Mina's heart jumped into her throat, and the yard filled with sharp breaths. But Mina did not scream. She did not wave her arms. She did not run. She stayed seated and said the same soft words again, even though her voice shook this time. It is okay. You are safe. Bruno hesitated, caught between old fear and new calm, and Nadia made her move in the smallest, gentlest way. She stepped in a little closer, not fast, not loud, and she spoke Bruno's name like a promise. Bruno. Easy. The dog's head turned, and his eyes landed on Nadia, then on Mina, then back to Nadia. For a second, it looked like he might choose fear again, and everyone braced for the worst idea their minds could invent. But Bruno's ears tilted forward, and his body stopped trembling by a fraction. Nadia lifted the lead, ready to secure him. Mina kept sitting, breathing slowly, as if she was lending her calm to a creature who had forgotten how to borrow it. And in that thin space of silence, something changed in Bruno's face, as if he recognized that the small girl in front of him was not a trap, not a threat, not a shouting shadow from his past. He was still free, still powerful, still uncertain. But he was listening now. And everyone in the yard realized the next few seconds would decide whether this day became a disaster or a miracle. The silence felt heavy as if the air itself was waiting to see what choice Bruno would make next. Nadia stood close enough now to feel the warmth of his body, but far enough to respect the space he still needed. Her hand held the soft lead low, and relaxed, not raised, not shaking, not rushing the moment. Bruno's chest moved fast, then slower, then fast again, as if he was arguing with himself inside. His eyes kept moving between Mina and Nadia, trying to decide which calm to trust. Mina stayed on the ground with her back straight and her hands resting still just like before. Her legs felt stiff, but she did not shift because she knew even small changes could feel big to someone already scared. Kareem watched from behind the fence with his heart pounding louder than the sounds in the yard. He wanted to call out to Mina again, but his voice felt trapped in his chest. Ali stood nearby ready to close the gate if needed, but he had stopped gripping the bars so tightly. The fear that had rushed through the yard earlier now softened into something else, something careful and hopeful. Bruno lowered his head a little more and sniffed the ground near Mina's shoes. He paused there, taking in her scent again, as if checking a memory he had just made. Mina felt the air from his breath brush her ankle, and she swallowed but stayed calm. She remembered her mother's voice telling her that fear grows when it is fed by panic. So Mina fed the moment with quiet instead. Nadia took one slow step closer and spoke again using the same steady tone. She told Bruno that he was okay and that no one was here to hurt him. The words were simple and gentle, and Bruno seemed to lean into them without realizing it. His ears rose just a little, and his tail loosened from its stiff line. The people watching noticed the change, and their bodies relaxed by small degrees. No one cheered, no one moved suddenly, because everyone understood how fragile the moment still was. Bruno shifted his weight from one paw to another and looked back at the open yard behind him. Freedom was there, wide and empty and tempting, but it did not feel safe. Then he looked again at Mina, who had not moved at all. She was still just a small person on the ground, breathing slow and waiting. Something about her stillness felt familiar to Bruno, as if he had once waited like that himself. Nadia raised the lead a little higher, now still moving like water and not like wind. She reached toward Bruno's neck, but did not touch, yet giving him time to accept the idea. Bruno tensed for a moment, then stopped himself halfway through the reaction. His body seemed to remember that no one had chased him and no one had shouted. Mina spoke again softly, using the same words she had already chosen. She told him he was a good dog, even though she did not know if he believed it yet. Her voice shook slightly, but the meaning stayed gentle and honest. Bruno's head turned toward her, and he stared for a long second. His eyes were not hard now, but wide and searching. Nadia slowly looped the lead over his neck in one smooth, careful motion. The lead settled against his fur, without pulling, without force, without fear. Bruno flinched at first, then realized nothing bad followed. He froze for a second, then stood still. A breath moved through the yard like a shared release. Ali lowered his hands, and Kareem pressed his palms together, as if in silent thanks. Mina stayed seated because she had not been told otherwise and because she felt it was right. Nadia gently held the lead with both hands, keeping it loose and calm. She praised Bruno softly and let him feel the slack so he would not panic. Bruno stood there, breathing heavy but steady enough now to think again. His body was still powerful, still alert, but no longer exploding with fear. Nadia glanced at Mina and gave her a small nod of respect. She did not smile wide or speak loudly, but her eyes showed gratitude. Mina felt her legs starting to ache, but she did not mind. She felt like she was part of something important, even if she did not fully understand it. Kareem finally stepped forward slowly when Nadia signaled it was safe to move a little. He stayed behind Mina, not reaching for her, yet not wanting to break the calm. Bruno noticed the movement and turned his head, but did not grow tense again. He sniffed the air and then looked back at Nadia. Nadia guided him gently a step to the side, creating space between him and Mina. Bruno followed, not because he was forced but because he chose to. Mina stayed where she was until Nadia quietly told her she could stand now. She rose slowly, her legs shaky but steady enough to obey her mind. When she stood, Bruno looked at her again and then away. It felt like a polite choice, as if he was saying he trusted her enough not to watch her every move. Kareem reached Mina and placed a hand on her shoulder, finally feeling her warmth again. He did not pull her close right away, instead he crouched beside her to match her height. He told her she did very well, and his voice trembled with emotion. Mina nodded, but her eyes stayed on Bruno. She felt a strange mix of relief and sadness, as if she was saying goodbye to a quiet friend she had just met. Nadia guided Bruno toward the inside gate slowly, step by step. The dog walked with her, not resisting, not lunging, not trying to escape. Each step felt like a small victory written into the ground beneath their feet. Volunteers opened the inner door carefully and kept their movements calm and measured. Bruno paused once at the doorway and looked back at the yard. He looked at the painted wall and then at Mina again. Mina lifted one hand slowly and gave a small wave without moving closer. Bruno watched the hand and then looked away and walked inside. The door closed gently behind him without noise, without force. The yard finally released the breath it had been holding. Some people wiped their eyes, others sat down on benches feeling weak with relief. Ali leaned against the fence and laughed quietly in disbelief. Karim hugged Mina, then holding her tightly now that the danger had passed. Mina rested her head against his chest, still thinking about the dog. Nadia removed the lead once Bruno was safely inside and knelt to his level. She praised him again and told him he had done well. Bruno lay down slowly, as if the weight of the day had finally reached him. His eyes closed for a moment, then opened again, calmer than before. Outside the shelter felt different, quieter, softer, changed in a way no one expected. People spoke in low voices, sharing what they had just seen. Some called it luck, some called it training, some called it courage. But Nadia knew it was something deeper than all of that. She knew fear had met patience and patience had won this time. Mina and Karim left the yard later than planned, walking slowly toward the parking area. Mina kept looking back toward the building where Bruno rested. She asked her father if the dog would be okay. Karim told her he thought Bruno had just taken his first step toward a better life. Mina smiled softly, but her heart still felt tied to the shelter. She did not know it yet, but the story between her and Bruno was not finished. What happened that day would follow both of them into the days ahead. And the choice Bruno made next would surprise everyone even more. The next morning arrived quietly at the shelter, as if the place itself wanted to be gentle after the storm of the day before. Sunlight slipped through the tall windows and rested on the floor where Bruno lay awake but calm. His body felt sore not from movement, but from the long hours of fear that had tightened every muscle inside him. Nadia entered early before visitors arrived and sat on the floor a few steps away from him. She did not reach out or speak right away because she knew trust grew best when it was not rushed. Bruno watched her from the corner of his eye, breathing slow and steady. He remembered the girl with the quiet voice and the still hands. That memory stayed warm inside him like a soft place he could return to when the world felt sharp. Nadia spoke gently and told Bruno it was a new day and that he was safe. Her voice carried no pressure and no fear, and Bruno accepted it like a familiar sound. Later that morning Karim and Mina returned to the shelter even though they had not planned to come back so soon. Karim told himself they were only checking in and making sure everyone was fine. Mina knew better because her heart had not stopped thinking about Bruno since they left. She walked through the gates slower than usual, holding her father's hand tightly. When she saw Nadia she smiled and asked quietly about the dog. Nadia looked surprised and then relieved to see Mina again. She told Mina that Bruno had slept well and had eaten his breakfast. Mina nodded as if that was exactly what she had hoped to hear. Nadia asked Mina if she would like to sit nearby while Bruno rested behind the inner fence. Mina agreed quickly but promised she would stay calm and follow the rules. Karim stayed close, ready to step in if needed, but he trusted his daughter more than he trusted his own fear. They sat on a bench near the fence where Bruno could see them without feeling crowded. Bruno noticed Mina almost right away. His ears lifted and his head turned slowly as he focused on her presence. He did not bark and he did not stand up right away. He simply watched. Mina sat still just like before and rested her hands in her lap. She did not wave this time and she did not speak. She remembered how silence had helped him before. Nadia stayed nearby watching every movement and reading Bruno's signals. After a few minutes Bruno stood and walked closer to the fence. He stopped there looking at Mina through the bars. The space between them felt different now, not tense but thoughtful. Mina looked at his chest instead of his eyes and smiled softly. She whispered hello barely louder than her breath. Bruno sniffed the air and then sat down on his side of the fence. Nadia felt her chest loosen with relief at the choice he made. This was not a miracle, but it was progress. Visitors began to arrive later that day, and word of what had happened spread quietly among them. People spoke in low voices and pointed gently, not wanting to disturb the calm that had settled. Some looked at Mina with amazement as if she had done something magical. Mina did not feel magical. She felt tired and thoughtful and a little sad for Bruno. Karim filled out adoption forms for another dog they had come to see, but his eyes kept drifting back to Bruno's space. He asked Nadia careful questions about Bruno's future and what kind of home he might need. Nadia explained that Bruno needed patient space and people who understood fear. Karim listened closely and felt a heavy thought forming inside him. Mina looked up at him as if she sensed that thought before he spoke. Later that afternoon, when the shelter grew quieter again, Nadia asked Mina if she wanted to help with something small. She explained that she sometimes read stories aloud to nervous dogs to help them get used to calm voices. Mina agreed happily and chose a simple book from her bag. She sat near the fence and began to read slowly. Her voice was soft and even, and she did not rush the words. Bruno lay down again, listening without fully understanding but feeling the rhythm of safety. Each page turned felt like another thread weaving trust between them. Karim watched from a distance, realizing that this place and this dog had already changed something in his daughter. He felt proud but also uncertain because big choices often began with small quiet moments like this. Over the next few days, Mina and Karim visited often. They did not rush and they did not ask for special access. They followed rules and let Bruno decide how close he wanted to be. Bruno slowly began to show signs of comfort. He ate with less tension and slept more deeply. He responded better to training sessions and stopped pacing in tight circles. Nadia noticed these changes and wrote careful notes in his file. She knew progress could go backward as easily as forward. Still, she could not ignore the difference Mina had made. One afternoon, Bruno surprised everyone by bringing a toy closer to the fence where Mina sat. He did not push it through or offer it directly. He simply placed it near and lay down beside it. Mina's eyes widened, but she stayed calm. Nadia nodded encouragingly and told Mina she could speak to him. Mina thanked Bruno for the toy even though she could not touch it yet. Her voice carried gratitude and respect. Bruno rested his head on his paws and watched her, as if listening carefully. That night Karim lay awake thinking about responsibility and fear and love. He thought about the promise he had made to protect Mina. He also thought about the promise he felt forming toward Bruno. The next day he spoke with Nadia privately. He asked if Bruno could ever be ready for a home. Nadia answered honestly and said yes, but only the right home. Karim asked what the right home looked like. Nadia described patience, routine, understanding, and space for healing. Karim felt his heart beat faster as he realized those words matched his own home more than he expected. Mina joined them and looked between the two adults, sensing the weight of the conversation. She did not interrupt. She simply held her father's hand and waited. Bruno watched them from his space, sensing the shift in energy. He stood and moved closer to the fence again. This time he wagged his tail once, slow and unsure. It was not a big movement, but it felt like a question. Karim knelt down to Bruno's level, still on the other side of the fence. He spoke calmly and introduced himself properly for the first time. Bruno sniffed and listened and stayed where he was. The shelter felt like it was holding another breath. Everyone knew that something important was forming, but no one wanted to name it too soon. Mina smiled quietly, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She did not know what the final choice would be. She only knew that Bruno was no longer alone in his fear, and that whatever happened next would change all of their lives. The final week at the shelter felt slower than all the days before, as if time itself wanted to watch what would happen next. Bruno continued to show quiet signs of change that only patient eyes could notice. He waited calmly during feeding time and no longer flinched at soft footsteps behind him. When visitors passed his space, he watched without pressing his body to the back wall. Nadia wrote updates each day and shared them with Karim carefully. Karim read every note more than once, letting the meaning settle in his chest. Mina visited every afternoon after school, sitting in the same place and reading in the same calm voice. Her routine became a steady light in Bruno's day. Bruno began to expect her arrival and lifted his head when he heard her steps. Sometimes he walked to the fence and sat without being asked. Other times he simply listened from his bed, comforted by the sound of her voice. The shelter staff noticed that Bruno's eyes looked softer now. The tight lines in his body slowly eased as if he had learned how to rest again. One afternoon Nadia asked Karim if he would like to walk Bruno inside the training room with her guidance. Karim felt nervous but agreed because he trusted Nadia and respected Bruno's pace. Mina watched from a chair while Karim entered slowly. Bruno hesitated at first, then allowed the lead to rest against his neck. Nadia guided Karim on how to stand and how to breathe. Karim focused on staying calm, remembering how Mina had done the same. Bruno took a few steps and stopped, then took a few more. The room stayed quiet and patient. When the walk ended, Bruno returned to his space without panic. Mina clapped softly once before catching herself and stopping. Bruno glanced at her and wagged his tail once. That single movement filled the room with something close to joy. Later that evening, Karim and Mina sat together at home speaking quietly. Karim asked Mina how she felt about Bruno. Mina answered honestly and said she felt like Bruno trusted her. She said she wanted him to feel safe every day, not just at the shelter. Karim listened carefully and felt the weight of her words. He knew adopting Bruno would not be easy or quick. He also knew some things were worth growing into slowly. The next morning, Karim returned to the shelter alone to speak with Nadia. They sat at a small desk and talked about responsibility and patience. Nadia explained the challenges Bruno might face in a new environment. Karim asked questions and took notes, wanting to be prepared. When Nadia finally asked if he was sure, Karim answered with a steady voice. He said he was ready to try with guidance and care. Nadia smiled, not wide but warm, because she knew this decision came from respect, not impulse. Paperwork began slowly and carefully with clear understanding on all sides. Mina arrived later that day and saw the forms on the desk. She did not jump or shout. She stood still and looked at her father, waiting for confirmation. Karim knelt and told her that they were taking the next step. Mina hugged him tightly, then walked quietly to Bruno's space. She sat down like always and spoke softly. She told Bruno that he was going to come home with them if he wanted. Bruno listened and walked closer to the fence. He pressed his nose near her hand through the bars. Mina did not reach out too fast. She waited until Nadia nodded. Then she gently placed her fingers where Bruno could sniff them. Bruno accepted the touch calmly. The shelter seemed to glow with relief. The transition period began with short visits to Karim's home. Bruno explored slowly, guided by Nadia and Karim together. Mina stayed quiet, letting Bruno decide where to go. Each visit ended on a calm note, building confidence instead of pressure. Bruno learned the sounds of the house and the feel of soft floors. He chose a corner near the window to rest. At night he slept deeply for the first time in a long while. The final move happened on a quiet morning. Bruno walked into the house and stopped just inside the door. Mina sat on the floor nearby reading her book. Karim stood back, giving space. Bruno took one step forward, then another. He circled once and lay down near Mina. The house felt whole in a new way. Days passed and routines formed. Bruno learned when meals came and where the sun landed in the afternoon. Mina learned how to read his signals and give him space. Karim learned that patience was not waiting but choosing calm again and again. Bruno still had moments of fear, but they passed more gently now. Each time he found comfort instead of chaos. Neighbors noticed the change and spoke kindly. Bruno began to walk outside with confidence. His head stayed high but relaxed. One evening Mina and Bruno sat together watching the sky turn orange. Mina rested her head against his shoulder. Bruno stayed still, breathing slow. Karim watched from the doorway, feeling a quiet pride. He realized that trust had been built not through force but through choice. Bruno had chosen to listen. Mina had chosen to stay. And Kareem had chosen to grow. The story that began with fear ended with understanding. Not because danger disappeared, but because compassion stayed. Bruno was no longer the dog everyone ran from. He was the dog who found his place through patience. And Mina was the girl who taught a frightened heart how to feel safe again.